Some moments aren't planned, some words aren't rehearsed, and some emotions, no matter how hard you try to contain them, find a way to surface when you least expect it. This was one of those moments. When Jungkook spoke about Taehyung, it didn't feel like a performance. It didn't feel like something prepared for the spotlight. Instead, it felt like a quiet truth slipping through, raw, sincere, and deeply human. The kind of moment that makes people pause, rewind, and listen again, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said, and almost immediately fans felt it, not as a rumor, not as a headline, but as a feeling. Jungkook has always been known as someone who chooses his words carefully. He laughs easily, performs effortlessly, and connects with fans in ways that feel warm and genuine. But when it comes to speaking about people who matter deeply to him, there's often a noticeable pause, a moment where you can almost see him deciding how much of his heart he's willing to share. That's why this moment stood out. There was no dramatic setup, and emotional music and expectation that this would become something people would analyze frame by frame. Yet somehow, it did. Fans noticed the shift in his tone, the way his voice softened, the brief silence before he continued speaking. Those tiny details, the ones that usually pass unnoticed, suddenly became impossible to ignore, and when he mentioned Taehyung, it felt personal, not exaggerated, not sensational, just honest. For ARMY, moments like these resonate because they reflect something familiar. Not everyone understands what it's like to grow up under constant attention, to share formative years with the same group of people, to rely on them not just as colleagues, but as anchors in an unpredictable world. Jungkook and Taehyung didn't just meet through work. They grew up together in an industry that demands perfection while offering very little room for vulnerability. Over the years, fans have watched them evolve, not just as artists, but as individuals navigating fame, pressure, and change. When Jungkook spoke with visible emotion, fans didn't hear gossip, they heard history. They heard years of shared stages, late-night practices, inside jokes, disagreements, reconciliations, and quiet support that never makes headlines. That's why the moment felt heavy. Not in a negative way, but in a meaningful one. Some relationships don't need constant explanation. They exist in glances, in comfortable silences, in understanding that doesn't require words. Jungkook and Taehyung have always shared that kind of connection, at least from what fans can observe. There have been moments of loud laughter, moments of playful teasing, and moments of quiet distance, but what has always remained consistent is the sense that they understand each other in ways that go beyond surface-level interaction. When Jungkook reflected on Taehyung, it wasn't about praise or grand statements. It was about acknowledgement, about recognizing someone's presence in your life and the impact they've had, even if you don't always say it out loud. That's what made it feel like something that wasn't meant for public consumption. It's important to be clear about one thing. This wasn't a dramatic revelation. It wasn't a declaration meant to spark speculation or fuel rumors. It was something far more subtle and far more powerful. It was reflection, the kind that happens when you look back and realize how much someone has influenced your journey, how their existence shaped moments you didn't fully appreciate at the time. Jungkook didn't frame his words as a story with a beginning and an end. He spoke as someone still in the middle of that story, still learning, still growing, still processing. Nothing was actually exposed. Nothing was secretly revealed. Yet fans described it as feeling leaked because it bypassed the usual layers of idle communication. It felt like a thought spoken out loud before it had time to be filtered. In an industry where every word is often polished, moments like this stand out sharply. They remind people that behind the choreography, the schedules, and the cameras, there are real emotions that don't always fit neatly into scripted narratives. That's why the moment spread so quickly, not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Taehyung has always carried a unique presence within the group. Artistic, introspective, expressive in ways that don't always follow expectations. And Jungkook, as the youngest, has often spoken about learning from the people around him, sometimes directly, sometimes quietly. When Jungkook referenced Taehyung, fans heard admiration layered with familiarity. Not the kind that needs explanation, but the kind that comes from shared experience. It wasn't about one moment. It was about accumulation, years of standing side by side, years of watching each other change, Years of supporting each other through moments the public never sees. One of the most talked about aspects of the moment wasn't even what Jungkook said, it was what he didn't. The pauses, the brief smiles, the way he seemed to search for the right phrasing. Those silences carried weight. Sometimes, silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's restraint, choosing not to say everything, even when you could, and fans recognized that. They didn't push for more. They didn't demand explanations. They simply listened. Contrary to what dramatic headlines might suggest, most fans didn't react with disbelief. There was no outrage, no chaos. Instead, there was something quieter, a collective nod of understanding. Many commented on how natural the moment felt, how it aligned with what they've observed over the years, how it reminded them why they connected with BTS in the first place. Not because of perfection, but because of authenticity. Fans shared their own reflections about friendships that shaped them, about people who stood by them through difficult seasons, about words they wish they'd said sooner. In that sense, Jungkook's reflection became universal. In a world driven by fast content and quick reactions, moments like this slow things down. They invite people to sit with emotion instead of chasing conclusions. They remind us that not everything needs to be defined or labeled, that some connections are meaningful precisely because they resist simple explanation. Jungkook didn't offer answers. He offered a glimpse, and sometimes that's more than enough. If there's one thing this moment made clear, it's that the story isn't over. Relationships don't freeze in time. They evolve, deepen, shift, and adapt. Whatever the future holds, it's evident that Jungkook and Taehyung share a bond rooted in shared history and mutual respect. And that bond continues to resonate with fans not because it's dramatic, but because it's genuine. There's comfort in knowing that even as everything changes, some connections remain steady, quietly influencing who we become. This wasn't meant to be public, but perhaps it was meant to be heard, not as a revelation, but as a reminder that behind the music, behind the fame, there are real people navigating real emotions, and sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that slip through without warning. Moments like this don't demand interpretation. They invite reflection, and long after the clip ends, the feeling lingers. In the end, Jungkook's words about Taehyung didn't change what fans believed. They reaffirmed it. That sincerity still exists, that genuine bonds still matter, and that even in the brightest spotlight, some emotions remain deeply personal. This wasn't about headlines, it was about humanity, and that's why it mattered.